David was on a business trip staying at a historic hotel known for its grandeur and elegance. He was looking forward to a good night's sleep after a long day of meetings. His room on the 4th floor was beautifully decorated with antique furniture and a large ornate mirror hanging opposite the bed. Exhausted, David settled in and quickly fell asleep. In the middle of the night, he was abruptly awakened by a strange feeling. His heart pounded as he realized he wasn't alone. He glanced around the room but saw nothing unusual. Dismissing it as a bad dream, he tried to go back to sleep. Just as he was drifting off, he heard a faint whisper. David sat up, straining to hear. The whispering grew louder, coming from the direction of the mirror. He turned on the bedside lamp and looked at the mirror, but only saw his own reflection. As he stared, the reflection seemed to distort, and a shadowy figure appeared behind him in the mirror. He spun around, but the room was empty. Terrified, he looked back at the mirror. The shadowy figure was now directly behind his reflection, a man with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. David grabbed his phone and ran out of the room, not stopping until he reached the lobby. The night manager, seeing David's distress, asked what was wrong. David explained what he had seen, and the manager's face grew pale. He revealed that several guests over the years had reported seeing the same figure in the mirror of that room. The man was believed to be a former guest who had died under mysterious circumstances in that very room. David refused to return to the room and was given another one for the night. He left the hotel early the next morning, vowing never to return. The memory of the man in the mirror haunted him for years, a chilling reminder of his disturbing night at the historic hotel. Sarah was on a solo trip, exploring a new city and staying at a quaint, old-fashioned hotel. The hotel had a charming, vintage feel with friendly staff and cozy rooms. After a day of sightseeing, she returned to her room, ready to relax and unwind. As she settled into bed, she heard a knock at the door. Confused, as she wasn't expecting anyone, she got up to answer it. Standing in the hallway was a young man in a bellboy uniform, holding a tray with a covered dish. "Room service," he said with a polite smile. Sarah was puzzled. "I didn't order anything," she replied. The bellboy insisted it was a complimentary late-night snack from the hotel. Hesitant but not wanting to be rude, she accepted the tray and thanked him. The bellboy nodded and walked away down the hallway. Sarah watched him until he turned a corner and disappeared from view. Curious, she lifted the cover from the dish to find a single unlit candle. Feeling uneasy, she set the tray aside and decided to go to bed. As she turned off the lights, she heard another knock at the door. Annoyed, she got up and opened it, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. Over the next few nights, Sarah experienced more strange occurrences. She would hear footsteps outside her door, but when she checked, no one was there. Objects in her room would move on their own, and she would occasionally hear faint whispers. One evening, she mentioned the strange happenings to a staff member. The staff member looked uncomfortable and reluctantly shared a local legend. Many years ago, a bellboy had died in a tragic accident in the hotel. Since then, guests occasionally reported seeing him, usually bringing them a tray with a candle. Shaken, Sarah decided to check out early. As she was leaving, she saw the same bellboy in the lobby, but when she blinked, he was gone. She hurried out of the hotel, leaving behind the eerie memory of the phantom bellboy.
John was on a road trip, staying at a budget hotel for the night. It wasn't the best place he had ever stayed, but it was clean and affordable. After a long drive, he was looking forward to a good night's sleep. Around 2 a.m., he was jolted awake by the sound of a woman screaming. The scream was blood-curdling, filled with terror and pain. John jumped out of bed, heart racing, and ran to the door. He opened it and looked down the hallway, but everything was quiet. The screaming had stopped as suddenly as it had started. He returned to his room, unsettled, and tried to go back to sleep. Just as he was drifting off, the scream came again, louder and more desperate. It seemed to be coming from the room next door. John called the front desk to report it, and the clerk promised to send someone to check. Minutes later, a security guard knocked on John's door. The guard explained that he had checked the room next door, but it was empty. No one had checked in there for weeks. John insisted he had heard the screams, but the guard shrugged and suggested it was a bad dream. Determined to find out what was happening, John did some research the next day. He discovered that several years ago, a woman had been murdered in the room next door. Her killer was never found, and since then, Guests had occasionally reported hearing her screams in the middle of the night. John checked out immediately, unable to shake the memory of the woman's screams. The hotel tried to downplay the incidents, but John knew what he had heard. It was a disturbing reminder that some places are haunted by the tragedies of the past. Emily was attending a conference in a large, upscale hotel. The hotel was luxurious, with spacious rooms and top-notch amenities. She was given a room on the 13th floor, which struck her as odd since many hotels skip numbering the 13th floor. Her room was comfortable and she enjoyed her stay. On the third night, she got lost looking for the ice machine. She wandered down a dimly lit hallway she hadn't noticed before. At the end of the hallway was a door with the number 1313. Curious, as she hadn't seen a room with that number on the floor plan, she approached it. As she got closer, she felt a cold draft and an overwhelming sense of dread. The door looked older than the others, with peeling paint and a tarnished handle. Against her better judgment, Emily tried the handle. The door creaked open to reveal a dark, empty room. She stepped inside and was hit by a wave of cold air and an intense feeling of fear. The room was completely bare with no furniture or decorations. The walls were covered in dark stains that looked suspiciously like blood. Emily's heart raced as she heard a low, growling sound coming from the darkness. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut, trapping her inside. Panicking, she banged on the door and shouted for help. The growling grew louder and she felt something cold brush against her leg. Just as she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the door flew open and she stumbled out into the hallway. A hotel staff member found her and helped her back to her room. Emily told the staff member about the room, but he looked puzzled and insisted there was no room 1313 in the hotel. She demanded to see the floor plan, and sure enough, there was no room 1313 listed. Emily checked out the next morning, unable to explain what had happened. She later learned that the hotel had once had a room 1313, but it had been sealed off years ago after a series of unexplained deaths occurred there. The experience left Emily with a chilling realization. Some places harbor dark secrets that defy explanation, and not every door should be opened. Jessica was excited for her weekend getaway at a charming old hotel in the countryside. The building had a rustic charm and a rich history which fascinated her. After checking in, she was given a key to room 213 on the second floor. She settled in and decided to explore the hotel. As she wandered down the hallway, she noticed a door at the end with no number on it. Curiosity got the better of her, and she tried the handle. Surprisingly, it was unlocked. Inside, she found a dusty, abandoned room with old furniture and cobwebs. It was as if the room had been forgotten for decades. That night, Jessica had trouble sleeping. She kept hearing faint whispers and the sound of someone pacing back and forth. At first, she thought it was coming from the hallway, but it seemed to be emanating from the walls of her room. She dismissed it as the creaks and groans of an old building. The next morning, she mentioned the strange noises to the receptionist, who looked puzzled. The receptionist assured her that room 213 had been unoccupied for years due to renovations. Confused, Jessica insisted she had stayed in room 213, but the receptionist showed her the records. Jessica had been given the key to room 213, but it was marked as under renovation and should have been locked. Jessica decided to investigate the abandoned room she had found the previous day. When she reached the end of the hallway, the door was gone. There was no sign that a room had ever been there. Jessica checked out immediately, haunted by the realization that she had spent the night in a room that didn't exist. Michael was traveling for business and booked a room in a modern high-rise hotel. The hotel had all the amenities he needed, including a fast elevator that whisked him up to his room on the 10th floor. After a long day of meetings, he looked forward to a quiet night's sleep. Around midnight, Michael decided to get a snack from the vending machine in the lobby. He pressed the button for the elevator and waited. When the doors opened, he stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. The elevator started its descent, but instead of stopping at the lobby, it kept going down past the basement levels. Panic set in as the elevator continued to descend into unknown depths. The lights flickered and the air grew colder. When the elevator finally stopped, the doors opened to reveal a dark, empty corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. Michael stepped out cautiously, his heart pounding. The walls were lined with old, rusted doors, each one slightly ajar. He heard faint whispers and the sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor. Michael turned to get back into the elevator, but the doors had closed and the buttons were unresponsive. He was trapped. As he walked down the corridor, trying to find another way out, he felt as though he was being watched. Shadows moved at the edges of his vision, and the whispers grew louder. Desperate, Michael started banging on the doors, hoping someone would hear him. Finally, the elevator doors opened again, and he rushed inside. The ride back up felt like an eternity, but when the doors opened, he was back in the lobby. Shaken, he told the night manager what had happened, but the manager insisted that the elevator had not left the lobby all night. Michael checked out immediately, unable to shake the feeling of dread and the eerie whispers that still echoed in his mind. He never stayed in a high-rise hotel again, fearing another ride to nowhere.